And you're welcome. No pleasantries this morning. Let's get straight into our first big story. We're going to begin with our focus on the escalating political crisis in Rivers State, where recent developments have sent shockwaves across Nigeria. Earlier this week, President Bola Tinubu declared a state of emergency in Rivers State, citing concerns over pipeline vandalism and a deteriorating political climate. Now, this unprecedented move led to the suspension of Governor Siminalayi Fubara, his deputy, and the dissolution of State House of Assembly for 6 months. The president appointed retired Vice Admiral Ibok-Ete as the sole administrator to restore order and ensure the security of the vital oil-producing region. Now, the catalyst for this drastic action includes recent incidents of pipeline vandalism, notably a fire outbreak on the Trans Niger Pipeline, a crucial artery for Nigeria's oil export. Such acts not only threaten the nation's economy, but also pose significant environmental hazards. The declaration has elicited mixed reactions nationwide. Legal experts are divided on the constitutionality of the president's actions. Professor Kola Salman, a constitutional law scholar, supports the emergency rule, asserting that it aligns with constitutional provisions and was necessary given the circumstances.
Conversely, the People's Democratic Party, PDP, has vehemently opposed the suspension of Governor Fubara. The PDP spokesperson, Debo Ologunagba, he condemned the move as an attack on democracy, arguing that the president lacks the constitutional authority to unilaterally suspend a democratically elected governor. And so to delve deeper into the PDP stance and the broader implication of this crisis, as well as looking at it from a legal standpoint, we're joined by two guests. First is Darlington Orji. He's a former National Publicity Secretary of the People's Democratic Party. He's going to join us subsequently on this discussion, but also joining us live in the studio to provide legal insight into the Rivers State political crisis is Adam Wahab. He's a senior associate at Olaniwun Ajayi LP with expertise in dispute resolution and constitutional law. Mr. Wahab, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Now, my monologue was pretty much on, I don't know if you watched it, was on the emergency ruling, right? And Mazzino was talking about the economic side of things, right? And this has been purported as an attack on, not just on economic, right? Because the pipeline vandalism was something that was on security, claimed security and pipeline vandalism. But it begs to ask the question about the early 2000s. There were pipeline vandalism, there was kidnappings, and there was raiding as well. Now we saw the Amnesty group was there, and what's the name of I keep forgetting the word that we're using for the boys in the creeks. So, right,
Avengers.
and the program had
Niger Delta Avengers.
The militants, exactly,
okay.
and they had to have a amnesty program for them to lay down their weapons, and a whole restructuring was happening. During that time, there wasn't any emergency ruling, right? And so, is this even looking at the situation in Rivers State that has played out?
Yes.
Was there a need for an emergency ruling?
Okay, well, thank you again for having me. The reference to the early 2000 was,
yeah.
During the administration of late Musa Yar'Adua,
yes.
The amnesty program,
yes.
and the effort the federal government took to bring normalcy to the situation. Well, in the wisdom of the current administration, if they consider that they do not in any way want to condone or allow the situation to degenerate to a situation where we now begin to talk about another amnesty, I think the federal government has a duty to do all that it is in its power to prevent a situation of complete breakdown of law and order, especially the one that will affect the national economy. And if you follow the justification offered by the president in the declaration of the proclamation, the president mentioned the imminent breakdown of law and order, as well as the security of the state, and it will eventually affect the national economy. Like we've referenced, the oil installations and the vandalism of pipelines. It's definitely going to affect the national economy. So, well, I expect that the president should take action to avert the situation and prevent a situation where we find ourselves, putting together another set of amnesty, packages.
Wahab, where do you stand on the stance of the NBA regarding the declaration?
Well, the NBA has spoken as a body, and I expect, as a body that about the rule of law.
What's their stance? What's their position? First of all, let's be clear on that.
Okay, so I prefer to speak more about what the law is.
Okay, go ahead.
Just for people to have an objective and unbiased understanding of the law before we begin to then apply the law to the facts that we have before us.
Okay,
in
so
determining the correctness or otherwise of the
So what does the law say
action of
regarding
the
the president's dissolution of an entire assembly, breakdown of democracy in an entire state, and also suspension of a sitting government?
Okay, so what we have in the law in section 305 is the procedure basically for the proclamation of a state of emergency. Unfortunately, we don't even have a helpful definition of what constitutes a state of emergency in 305. The closest we have is what we have in section 45, subsection 3 of the Constitution that defines a period of emergency. And that period is where the president declares under 305 a state of emergency. Now, the Constitution itself in 305 has enumerated about 6 instances, 6 grounds that can warrant the proclamation by the president of the state of emergency. The question is whether any of or a combination of any of those grounds, any one or a combination of any of them is present to justify the president's declaration.
So in this case here with Rivers State, how much justification, when you put into consideration all the factors, did it justify a state of emergency declaration? And while we're at it, did we need the Senate to ratify first before he actually put into play the sole administrator? Because here we see that the president actually put that into play without waiting for, he didn't wait for the National Assembly.
Going by the procedure under section 305, it's initiated by the president's proclamation and immediate gazetting of the proclamation and transmission to the National Assembly. Then the National Assembly is expected to, within 48 hours where it is in session, and of course the National Assembly is currently in session, to consider the proclamation and decide if they want to approve or reject it, and that approval has to be by an overwhelming two-thirds majority of all members of the House.
For the approval, however,
he need not wait for the approval to make the proclamation. Now, the National Assembly, as an independent arm of the government, has all its power to strike down the declaration if that's what they believe is the right thing to do. But in this case, the National Assembly, in their separate sitting, the Senate and the House of Rep, actually we got the resolution of the House of Rep first before that of the Senate followed. And meanwhile, the Senate actually modified the declaration and saying that even though the proclamation that was transmitted said that it was for an initial period of 6 months, the Senate said no, that on no condition will this be extended beyond 6 months, and actually resolve that the president should set up a committee to try and mediate between the warring factions in a way that the president will be justified to revoke the proclamation as soon as possible. So going by the Senate's resolution, I don't expect that this will even extend for 6 months or beyond.
Well, only time will tell. Very quickly, just to note that our correspondents, Nia Moniyi and as well as Biola Festus, they join us live all the way from Rivers State. They have been following this story as well, live in Rivers, and just making sure that they have their thumb on the situation. Ni and Biola, many thanks for joining us. We appreciate you for coming on. Is there an imminent break of law and order in Rivers State? Let me start with you, Ni. You're on the streets. What's going on?
I said it's a bright Saturday in Rivers State here, and while I would say maybe the Rivers people do not like to wake up quite early from bed, but that didn't stop them from going about their normal activities. Breakdown of order is not the core here in Rivers State. Everyone is doing their business as they should, and you can see behind me, activities are the same. Malls and the rest won't kick off this early. As I said earlier, the Rivers people take their time before they begin their activities for the day. So no breakdown of law and order here in Rivers State, from my own point of view, from what I can see.
And Biola, you have also been speaking to, some of the stakeholders and key voices in Rivers State, and they've all been opposing this emergency ruling that was imposed on the state, and the ousting or suspension, I beg your pardon, of the governor, the deputy, and the elected members, House of Assembly. What's been the reaction from the people and those voices?
The stakeholders in the state, some of them are beginning to accept this state of emergency rule. Yesterday, the sole administrator met with heads of local government administration, and he had said the outstanding salaries of local government workers would be paid. And the heads of local government administration told him they were going to support his rule. In the same vein, the sole administrator also met with the Traditional Rulers Council in Rivers State, and they all drummed up support for him. They said they were going to work with him to ensure he succeeds in his administration. So I think Rivers people are beginning to resort to the fact that this is our fate and we have to work with it. But there are also questions in the likes of where is our deputy governor? How did she come into this? All along it has been the governor being focused on for allegedly refusing to submit, to present the budget to the Ameole-led House, which the Supreme Court recognized recently. Their question has been, where did our deputy governor come into this? If the governor were to be impeached, which was the initial plan, the deputy would have resumed office or would have taken over his place. So why rope him into this? Is it that we just want the both of them out of the way for those, according to them, who want the soul of River State to capture it easily? So that's where we are actually.
Right. Let's come back to the studio and ask you, Wahab, I have to ask you about this, and that is the precedence this ruling sets.
Okay.
Right? And we have to be careful. We have to be very mindful of what this means.
Yes.
Because if we look at all of the cases where an state of emergency ruling has been declared, it has been in very dire situations.
Yes.
And the way it was carried out was constitutional. It was done with a process that was constitutionally correct. But this is a completely different approach to this. And so what does this set a dangerous precedent constitutionally?
Okay, so in terms of the procedure that this has followed, like I said earlier, it followed the procedure under 305 of the Constitution. Meanwhile, the Constitution that we currently operate has been with us since 1999, and this is not the first time under this Constitution that we'll be having a situation of proclamation of declaration of emergency. We've had this under President Obasanjo, involving Ekiti State and Plateau State at different times. We also had it under former President Goodluck Jonathan, which did not involve suspension of the governor, deputy, and the elected lawmakers. And that was, some states, Adamawa, Yobe, and Borno State in the northeastern part of the country. Yes. But here, the president is saying that there are intelligence reports available to the government concerning imminent danger of breakdown of law and order. And what we saw from the clip today from Rivers State is what has been brought about probably by the declaration, because the administration is already in place and has taken over and has promised to bring normalcy to the situation.
Can you clarify on that again? What we see today is based on what we've seen from after the declaration?
Yes. Isn't that
now you're referring to...
The administration is in place as we speak. So what we see today is under the control of the administrator. Okay. So now, going back to your question about setting a dangerous precedent, I must say that, so we've seen it before during Obasanjo's time. It necessarily involved the suspension of a sitting governor at that time. And this has been justified again by the current administration on the basis of imminent breakdown of law and order. Now, if you agree with me, we all know that the source of the issue, the tussle really, is a political debacle between the suspended governor and the lawmakers. So how do you then try to restore normalcy in the state without taking care of, with these two actors or either of them still in power. It may have that unwarranted effect of suspending an elected governor or even lawmakers. But the situation, to my mind, justifies the suspension, because to get to the root, to try to resolve the issue, both warring parties probably have to just excuse
Wahab, I'm going to defer to our correspondents on ground, Nee and Biola. Oh dear, I think we've lost Nee, but we still have Biola. Biola, while I'm asking this question, I'm hoping that we can get your audio corrected, because we couldn't hear too well from before. Perhaps maybe you're using a Bluetooth device. Maybe you should take that off. Now, I'm being told that we have Nee back. Nee, I wanted to check with you regarding the state of things inside of Rivers State. Now, we were talking about whether it was absolutely warranted, this state of emergency, whether the people actually have a sense of maybe some imminent violence that might have ensued since after the hullabaloo that we're seeing in Rivers State. Did it seem like there's such a thing in Rivers State currently? Do the people actually think or believe that there needs to be a state of emergency declaration? Nee, please.
From the handful of people I've spoken with, certainly not. They actually feel it's a waste of time, and they feel that the state of emergency and the sole administration has come to resumed in Rivers State is actually for personal purpose or for personal use of the federal government, according to them, in their words, if I can quote that. Because they said when the sole administrator landed in Rivers State, one of the comments he made was that you can see that Rivers is calm and is yet to also still maintain that calmness. So they're asking themselves, if Rivers is calm before the state of emergency, what exactly are you doing here? That was the question someone asked me as well. And I was like, I'm just a reporter. I can't answer those questions for you. He also asked so many questions, because from the press release, from the press briefing, the sole administrator also did that same day at about 7 p.m. He mentioned specifically, repeatedly, oil infrastructure and protecting the oil infrastructure. And they were like, oh, maybe at the end of the day, it's not really about the people. It's about the fact that there was an explosion in the state which affects the oil production, and we know how important Rivers State is to oil production and oil revenue generation in Nigeria. So they have the feeling that maybe that's his primary assignment and not necessarily for the people. However, the actions he has been taken in few days, because yesterday we know he met with traditional rulers. He also made a call to local governments, chairmen, that they should send their wage bill as a brief to him so that salaries can be paid and also outstandings. All these things we are seeing them, and we don't know how they're going to pan out. Although we see that it's likely he visits some of the local governments on Monday, which we are going to try to follow up on him and see what the conversations will be like. So for now, the people are saying that maybe his primary reason for being here is not really about the people, but is showing otherwise in his actions and in his words. We still have so many things to look out for us to determine, for the people themselves to determine that he's here for them. But for now, he seems to be stepping on the right places.
Nee, thank you for that very definitive clarification there regarding the state of things in Rivers State. Back to you, Wahab, now. Now we've just heard that it's calm. It may not be that the focus is on the people, Wahab, but that it is actually on the infrastructure. And when it comes to oil, Rivers State is very, very important. We also saw that there was a suspension, however, of the governor. There was no allowance for the legislature to actually do its duty. So why or what gives in that instance the declaration, but why the suspension? If the declaration is in place, well, because of economic reasons, which everybody could say, okay, fine, it's okay to do that. Why suspend the governor, and what recourse does the governor have legally?
Okay, so this is one of the burning issues, whether the declaration, even if justified, does it require the suspension? Now, I try to clarify that if the source, as in my opinion, the source of the root cause of the unrest is actually a political disagreement between the suspended governor and the lawmakers. And to that extent, I don't see how the proclamation can be effective with the governor and the lawmakers in office. That's the simple reason to justify the suspension. The other question is whether the president has the constitutional power to suspend. Truly, under Section 305, there's nothing in writing in that provision that expressly grants the power to the president to suspend any elected officer in the process of the proclamation. However, that provision is subject to the other provisions of the Constitution. And usually when we interpret the Constitution, and constitutional law gurus will agree with this, that you don't isolate a particular section for the purpose of interpretation. You approach it purposively and look at other provisions that can come in aid where you don't find the answer in a particular provision. Now, there are other provisions in the Constitution, for instance, section 14 subsection 2, thereabout, says that the essence of governance is to ensure the welfare and security of the people. And that, I think, that box stops at the president's office. He has a duty to ensure peace, security, and good governance of every part of the federation.
At the cost of democracy.
Secondly, now, if you say democracy, our democracy is a constitutional democracy, and I'm speaking within the confines of the Constitution. There's also another provision. For instance, there's a provision that allows the National Assembly to take over the functions of a State House of Assembly, where the State House of Assembly is unable to, for whatever reason, convey and have meetings. But in that provision, I think it's under Section 11, it was expressly provided that that will not in any way empower the National Assembly in taking over the function of the State House of Assembly to remove or suspend or impeach a governor or a deputy governor. Now, because this is missing in 305, so 305 is completely silent. It does not say you can remove, and it does not say you cannot remove, as it has said to the National Assembly that it cannot remove.
So we have to then look the president took that decision on his own.
Yes. No. So
constitutionally,
the justification within the Constitution first is that it does not say he can and it does not say he cannot. But he has a duty to ensure peace, good governance, and security in every part of the country.
Let's talk about that duty. Just a second, Wahab.
Yes.
Judith,
wait.
I wanted to say something about this and why I'm leading you this way. We've talked about the suspension of the governor, we've talked about democracy, we've talked about the legislature and them being paralyzed and all of that. But we've not talked about the elephant in the room with the mustache. What about Wike's meddlesome, it would seem, alleged meddlesome activities inside of River State? Why was there no consideration given to that by the president? Okay. And he was a big part of all of this. Okay, well, that's what everybody says. I don't hold brief for the president or Wike or any person, but if you look at the proclamation, the content of it, just suppose it with the law. Is the president right? Has the president acted within the confines according
of the
to what
Constitution?
you've defined, it seems so. But what about Wike's influence in River State? There was no consideration at all.
So I think this would have been fantastic for Darlington Orji to. Hopefully, we can have it on to treat this question.
Well, I wanted to know from a legal point of view.
There is no legal context to it.
That's what I'm saying.
It's probably a political issue.
It's a political issue. So
we don't lawyers generally. If you find a lawyer, talking politics, he's speaking probably as a politician. I'm not a politician. And political issues really are not justiciable. They are not issues you can take to court. The court will say, no, we don't deal with political issues.
I wish we could talk about, just how this administration, the way it started in 2024 and all the way down to today, and it's just that it's always been the interpretation of the law, whether or not the law says 27 states plus the FCT and the FCT. And now we're here. Consistently, we have to talk about the semantics and the interpretation and the void and what exactly it says. Not really as is. It's very interesting that we keep, this goalpost keeps shifting every single time. And again, I would say that this sets a very dangerous precedent. But away from this, let's talk about the impact that this has on separation of powers. The House of Assembly for River State has been dissolved and replaced with the sole administrator as well. What does this mean for separation of power and the legislative arm of River State?
Okay, so, well, it is what it is. As it is now, there is no House of Assembly for a period where the state of emergency is in place. So that caveat has to be there. Now, is it constitutionally allowed? It is an aberration that the Constitution has recognized. If the Constitution gives the president the power to proclaim a state of emergency, subject to the ratification within such a short time as 48 hours by both houses of the National Assembly. That's the checks and balance in play there at the federal level. If the National Assembly, the lawmakers, don't agree with the president, they would have simply voted down the proclamation, and that would have been and that would have been separation of power in play. So what we have at the state level is an aberration. It's not the ideal thing, but that is what you see in a period of state of emergency. It's as simple as that.
Your expertise is in dispute resolution, but because I want to focus on dispute resolution, right? Zino's talked about Wike being in all of this and how he's meddled in River State, and this is at its very core.
Allegedly, let's throw it in there.
And at its very core, this is a godfather-godson fight that have now dissolved into, as you say, an attack on our economy. How would this have been resolved as an expert in dispute resolution?
Yes.
How can this have been resolved to the point where salaries had not been withheld?
Yes.
The back and forth with an Okojombo-led house and then Martin Amawale-led house, and the factions and non-defactions, and this person said this and that person said this, and then ethnic clashes and rhetorics. How would this have played out if dispute resolution was brought into the fore instead of a rule of emergency?
So I think it's important to note that dispute already has gone to court. The dispute between the lawmakers and the suspended governor. Cleverly, Wike, you won't find his name anywhere on the court papers. That's why it's hard to talk about him in legal context. Politically, you can speak to that. I've said I won't speak politics. I'm not a politician. So, but looking at dispute resolution process, this dispute was submitted to court, and it went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was so angry to know that there has been no government in place for such a long time, to the extent that there's even no budget that has been approved by the State House, and gave a directive that the governor should immediately take steps to comply. Put your house together. In the first place, the governor...
Was he allowed to put his house in order?
The suspended governor, for instance, I know bulldoze the house of the lawmakers where they ordinarily carry out their constitutional duties. And that's not how to go about it. Go to your lawmakers, present your budget, get it passed. It's even a very dicey situation that a state as important as...
Very many people argue with you there, Wahab, but we don't have time.
And we are already in March.
Wahab,
yes.
Very many people will argue with you on that one regarding whether he, was given the appropriate time or whether he actually went about the proper actions and all of that. But we don't have time to discuss that. I wish that we had more time. But yeah, there are many ways to look at this on both sides of the divide here.
But the point is that issue has been submitted, and the Supreme Court, the apex source, has resolved it. And so when there is no action on the judgment of the court, and the president cited it that after the decision of the Supreme Court, the governor hasn't taken steps within reasonable time and has not even sent a request to the president to make a declaration.
Thank you very much, Wahab. Interesting takeaway from all of this for me was the fact that one of the biggest players has his name in no document whatsoever.
And I must say that he's a mastermind. I must say he's a juggernaut at this political
I'm not going to position him for or against any. No. I'm just saying that he has been mentioned so many times, but we have heard his name in no way, shape, or form legally in any of the businesses that.
I must say the way he's played his game, respect to him. I would give him that.
So even looking forward. So let me just make this point. Even looking forward, that as it is now, if either of the affected parties could take any judicial action, you won't even find because
exactly is the point.
I've never seen anything like it.
Ladies and gentlemen,
brilliant.
The conversation got very interesting at the very end there, but I want to say thank you very much to you, Wahab, for coming through and giving us your legal expertise on the matter. Very interesting, and then it's brought some very interesting insights into play here. Do stay tuned, we've got more coming your way. Of course, Biola and Ani, our apologies. Thank you very much for joining us too. And yeah, we can't wait to have you guys back here. But for the meantime, do remain in Rivers State, where we can come to you for all the nitbits that we need to know about the state of emergency.
He's got a son. He has to come back home to his baby boy.
Eventually, you will be welcome back. Thank you, Nee. Thank you, Biola. Thank you, Wahab.